So, we are going to continue our focus on communities with this next panel. It's the Community Benefits Panel. In my introduction to the previous panel, I spoke of the coordinated and integrated approach to private and public policy and investment that created the long boom that lasted from the 1950s to about 1980. Vibrant communities were central to the success of this economic strategy. Today, communities across the north are preparing for the anticipated LNG investment. We at the Community Development Institute at UNBC have been working with communities to help them prepare. In our work, we have talked to communities about two key themes. The first, leveraging lasting community benefit through both the construction and operation phases of these projects, and being prepared for multiple futures because, as Premier Clark said this afternoon, things are changing rapidly, markets change rapidly, and we all have to be prepared for a number of outcomes. Planning for these projects at the community level is very challenging, as we have heard. There is excitement, there is concern, there is uncertainty, and there is a great potential. We are all conscious of this being a generational opportunity. So to discuss this, we are joined by our second panel. The first is Ron Poole, who is Chief Administrative Officer for the District of Kitimat. Kitimat is experiencing an active economy fueled by billions of dollars of announced investment. Ron's challenge is to work collaboratively with industry, First Nations, and government in order to encourage and support sustainable development in the area. Having worked the 29 years in local government in northern British Columbia, he has seen the ups and downs associated with resource communities and applies this experience to his job. The District of Kitimat is committed to ensuring that proper community planning remains the focus as we approach the build-out of these mega projects. Issues such as transportation, port development, social impacts, and airshed emissions need to be collaboratively addressed if we are to be successful in developing industry along with a livable community. Our second panelist is Robert Long, who is a city manager at the City of Prince Rupert. Bob Long has returned to Prince Manager, having been born there in the last century. Bob has 30 years' experience in municipal management throughout the province of British Columbia. He holds a master's degree in political science and is known for his innovative thinking and frank approach to community development. Our third panelist is Heather Avison. Heather has been the Chief Executive Officer for the City of Terrace since July 2012 and has 23 years of service with the organization in various capacities. The location of Terrace is 63 kilometers north of Kitimat and 143 kilometers east of Prince Rupert, with all road and rail traffic to these communities traveling through Terrace first. Although Terrace will not have an LNG facility or an LNG pipeline in the community, it is positioned to be the service and supply center for industry in the region. With this comes both benefits and challenges, and Heather's council and administrative team are committed to collaborating with the region, the province, and industry to ensure that their community remains strong and healthy throughout the economic transformation. And our fourth and final speaker is Alan Dunlop. Alan is the Vice President Chevron Canada Limited and General Manager of Kitimat LNG, a position he has held since January 2013. He is responsible for managing Chevron's interest in the entire Kitimat LNG value chain, including the execution of Kitimat LNG plant and the Pacific Trail pipeline projects, LNG marketing and commercial matters, external relations, and oversight of Chevron's non-operated joint venture interests in associated upstream assets at Horn River and the Liard basins. He was previously Vice President and General Manager of Asset Development and General Manager of Business Development with Chevron Canada. Mr. Dunlop joined Chevron in 1981 after graduating with a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Saskatchewan. He has held numerous positions and assignments in engineering, development, production, exploration, LNG, planning, and business development during his career, including assignments in Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, Perth, Australia, and San Ramon, California. Alan is a registered professional engineer. So, as with our previous panel, I'm going to invite our panelists to provide opening remarks, and we will start with Ron Poole.
Thank you, Marleen. What we've done for this presentation is we put some pictures up behind us, and as you'll see, it represents our communities, and we felt that was probably, if you're bored of listening to us, you'll get some enjoyment out of the pictures.
Not yet.
However, I think what I'd like to say, for those of you who aren't familiar with Kitimat, Kitimat can best be described as an industrial-based community. It started in the late 1940s, early 50s, when the Aluminum Company of Canada chose the site for its West Coast smelter, aluminum smelter. Since that time, we've had other industries such as Yurkan Pulp and Paper locate there, as well as Methanex, which had a methanol plant. So in the 1980s, at its peak, there were about 14,000 people that lived in Kitimat, and these three industries provided jobs, direct jobs, for about 3,000 people. But unfortunately, in 2005, the Methanex plant closed down. In 2010, Yurkan closed down. The population dropped to around 8,000, but today we currently sit around 10. So LNG is that opportunity to bring the community up to where it was 30 years ago. My mayor and council have been very open that we need to be supportive of industry, we need to work with them. And of course, it doesn't mean that we just lay the red carpet out and you come straight into town and all is fine. We have to work with the First Nations. You've heard Ellis Ross here earlier speak. We work collaboratively with the province, and I appreciate Alan being here because Chevron is also one of those companies in town that has proven itself to be a good partner and someone that we can work with. So I think what basically I'm saying is the workforce there is very much industrial. The community has an industrial heart. And I think the purpose of this panel today is really to talk about how those impacts may be hitting us and what we can do to address them. Just quickly, some of the things that we're working with, because Rio Tinto Alcan has started their modernization phase. It's been about 2.5 to 3 years, and that has given us what I'm going to call a mini boom in the community. So we're able to take that as a microcosm of what, I'm not going to say could, but will happen when Chevron makes its final investment decision along with Shell. And we can apply that. So we're seeing things already stress on our infrastructure, things like sewer capacity, transportation routes, housing, social services. Currently, there's about 3,000 workers in camps within municipal boundaries in Kitimat. We expect with these later announcements, there could be up to 14,000 people living within the boundaries in camps. Now you got to imagine that is 1.5 times the current population. So we have to be prepared. And part of that is having those early dialogues with industry and with the province. Just very quickly, we are working on bringing our port back up to what it used to be 30 years ago. We're working on the West Douglas corridor, which talks about the placement of pipelines, and of course with power and roads, and finally looking at the air emissions study. We're hoping that these things help industry and actually don't become deterrents to them. And I think I'll end it there. Marleen, thank you.
Great, thank you, Ron. Our second speaker is Bob Long from the City of Prince Rupert.
Thanks, Marleen. our approach is to watch and see what Ron does wrong and make sure we don't do it all over again in Prince Rupert. So, and that's great because we have sort of an experiment going on in Kitimat, and we'll try to mitigate for, we'll steal all his good ideas too, by the way, Ron. Prince Rupert is a little different context. In the history of the North, Prince Rupert probably was one of the first communities to really get going as a result of the industrialization of the fishing industry before the start of the last century that I was born in, the one before that. It developed over the early part of the 19th century into quite a thriving fishing industrial community, and subsequently was bolstered by a number of other industrial uses, including in the 40s, like Kitimat, with a pulp mill, and then using the resources of the forest around there, and that built a fairly vibrant community. The community is made up of many different ethnic groups, obviously starting with our First Nations, and probably finishing with the likes of Icelanders such as myself, and a large community of Italians and many different nationalities. And what I always remember as a kid is we all kind of combined together to build what was, and it still is in many ways, a very vibrant and interesting and eclectic community. Now, what I wanted to lay out was just for some context about communities, because that's what we do here. I wanted to say that in northern British Columbia, there's a continuum of how communities actually develop. So usually there's a resource that needs to be developed, and as a result of that, we start to house industrial labor on one end of that spectrum. And over time, we build what I call a community, and we move it towards what I see as my definition of a community, which is usually seen by multi-generational people living in the community. And you can usually see that by the grandchildren and the fact that the grandparents are still there, and the community is still thriving at a multi-generational level. And I kind of see our role, my role as the city manager, is to make sure as we go through this massive tsunami of industrial activity, economic activity, then in fact we end up with the attributes that we have grown to know and love in Prince Rupert. One of the interesting anecdotes, when I first came back to Rupert to work as the city manager, one of the first meetings with the staff, we kind of ran around the table, and I think there was only one employee that didn't have 2, 3, or 4 generational connection to the community. That kind of depth and embeddedness in place, which I think I hear lots of times in respect in the First Nations communities, we have those same kind of attributes. And it's really important as the city manager to make sure that when we go through this massive industrial development and all the benefits that go with it, that we still have some of those community attributes. And so for me, the lens that I will look at all the things that come across my desk, and I think council supports this, is that we'll look at it from the lens of making sure that when we're finished, this iteration of resource development will actually be the kind of community that we wanted to be and built ourselves to be before this happened. So I think that those are my, I guess, opening remarks.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
Clapping is not necessary because I gather the mayor is out there. He's going to hold up cards as to how we did at the end.
Our next speaker is Heather Avison from the City of Terrace.
Hi. Thank you, Marleen. I think with Terrace, the most important thing I think that I'd like to sort of get across today maybe is just we're different in the sense that we're not a coastal community and we are not going to have an LNG facility in our community, but we certainly are very close, particularly to Kitimat, but not that far away either from Prince Rupert and Port Edward. So we're positioned really well. We're often referred to as the hub of the Northwest, and I think if you're familiar with the area, it's quite obvious that that's in fact what we are. And it was mentioned in the preamble about the fact that the road and rail all kind of comes through Terrace and going out to Prince Rupert and Port Edward and Kitimat. So it's kind of a location thing for Terrace, I think. We were at one time a very thriving logging community for many, many years, but obviously that's diminished substantially over the years. And I think we've been very resilient during that time, and we have managed to really work hard to establish ourselves as a very robust service and supply center for the Northwest region. I think we already do that for the industry that's currently happening, and we're certainly well positioned to take advantage of the benefits that will come with this LNG development in the region as well. We're seeing some early benefits now with many of our businesses are very busy, and restaurants are busy, and hotel rooms are full, and we're seeing a lot of redevelopment of properties. So some good positives there that are pretty exciting to see, but that comes along with it, with our challenges, of course. I think that one key piece of infrastructure we have that's going to be very, very important to this LNG development is the Northwest Regional Airport, which is within our municipal boundary but services the region. It's an excellent facility already, and I think they've the Airport Society has done some very good work to make the airport very attractive and serviceable. It's got an ILS system, and they've extended the runway, things like that. But the reality of it is with this growth is coming at such a pace that the airport is, despite their best efforts, I think, is definitely going to need some help to be the facility that it needs to be. So I think industry will play a role in that, in ensuring that that facility is developed and able to support what's happening here. Just for interest's sake, the passenger stats at the airport, for example, in 2011, it was about 120,000 passengers. And just in this last 12-month period from May 2013 to May 2014, they've surpassed 209,000 passengers, and it's just ramping up all the time. So just to give a bit of perspective to the real numbers. Sorry, I have to refer to my notes here. So I think that industry is talking with the airport, and I think that that's really good. It's one thing too that the airport has been really trying to accomplish that will also support industry is to get CBSA services and CAMPAS services reinstituted at the airport to just provide a higher level of service to industry as well. So looking to the province and to industry to support in getting those services back at the airport. Yeah, I think another key piece is that Terrace is, many of the workers, using Rio Tinto Alcan as an example, about 25% of their workforce lives in Terrace and the surrounding area, and so we expect to see the same thing with this other, the new industry that's developing. So our community is going to have a lot of the same benefits and impacts that, that Kitimat and Prince Rupert will have as well. Yeah, I think that that's really it. I think Terrace, I think it's just really important that industry understand that even though we will not be an endpoint for an LNG facility, I think we do play a very important role in the Northwest. And just to see that role recognized, I think will be important going forward.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Heather.
Welcome.
And Alan.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the Coast Salish First Nations territory, and thank them for allowing us to meet here and for their welcome. So I'm going to talk today about Chevron Canada as operator of the LNG plant at Kitimat, the proposed LNG plant, and the PTP pipeline. And we operate this project on behalf of our 50% co-venturer, Apache Canada. So the heart of what we do to start with, and I'll back up a little just from Kitimat, although Ron has some great pictures of our site here that you'll see. I'll back up a bit and talk a bit about Chevron. So Chevron, we have over 60,000 people around the world. We're in over 100 countries. And the way we try and conduct ourselves is sort of entailed in this little brochure here. And there we go, it's called the Chevron Way. I know our colleagues from Apache delight in hearing me talk about the Chevron Way, but there's really three core principles that belong to the Chevron Way that we think are applicable, and it's people, partnership, and performance. And what we're here talking about this afternoon is partnership, but it's also about people, and ultimately it'll lead to performance. Okay, and we can summarize the Chevron way. It's getting results, because that's what we're interested in, but doing it the right way. Okay, so that guides our discussion with communities and with the partners. So we have a broad variety of partnerships across the breadth of what we do at Chevron, and each of them is unique. And I think that's one thing that we've learned is no community, no First Nation has the same needs identically to others. And so the conversation and the listening is a really important part of getting this all to work. An example of our partnerships are, we have a number of them with First Nations in BC. We're very proud of those. This includes our relationship with the Haisla First Nation. Our plant will be situated on their site, and one of the pictures that Ron showed was our early works on the plant site. And we have a very structured benefits agreement with the Haisla. In addition, we have a First Nation limited partnership, which is along our Pacific Trail pipeline right-of-way, and we have a partnership there with 15 of the First Nations. And I think those two agreements are almost unparalleled in energy in Canada with the First Nations, and they provide financial considerations, there's training, employment, opportunities to be involved in environmental stewardship, and really make sure that the First Nations are truly participating in this project and benefit from the project. When we turn to jobs, and I'm going to have to refer to my notes too for statistics, but we've let out close to $400 million worth of contracts, and 80% of those contracts have gone to First Nations, either partnerships or joint ventures, and over half the hours worked on our pipeline right-of-way right now, which is over 370,000 hours, have been performed by First Nations. So they're, I think, demonstrating, or we're demonstrating together, that they are benefiting from the early works that we're doing. Okay? So then we turn to employment, and echoing the comment of the people we want to employ long-term are the folks in the community first. And we know they're dedicated to the community, they're interested in seeing the community develop, and that's who we want to employ. But we realize it's important to prepare for that. And I think Ron spoke a bit about that. We need to get ready, and we need to participate in that by having a dialogue about what skills and training we need to do. Okay? We don't stop at employment as well, though. We have other examples of where we have some partnerships in the environmental area, which, and I've got a couple. One is in Douglas Channel. We have a place called Cleo Bay, and with the Haisla Nation, with the regulator, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, biologists, marine biologists, and the Kitimat project team, we've developed a proposal where we will try and remediate essentially a bay that used to have marine life that is now somewhat sterile due to past logging activities. So that's an example of partnership there. Another example, closer maybe to Ron's heart here, is and there's a picture of the Eurocan industrial site that is now part of our project. It's languished for several years. It has a landfill on it. Our plan is our proposal is to renovate that landfill. Then we can use that for camp waste instead of using the District of Kitimat landfill and taking some pressure off some of the facilities. Okay, and maybe lastly, in terms of a recent example, is we've gotten ourselves involved with a Kitimat industry group that maybe we'll speak to a bit later. Okay. So our key message is finding the common ground isn't easy. It takes a lot of resources from the community, a lot of resources from the project. Particular challenge with our pipeline is it's very spread out, obviously. It's 470 kilometers long, and so this requires a lot of work and a lot of listening to find those unique needs. Okay. So in the end, to me, we come back to our Chevron way, and it's getting results the right way. So as we try and move this project forward, and we do get to that day where we take final investment decision, and we can get a lot more committed on the dollars, You know, we're going to continue efforts up till that point to work with the communities, try and build some of these long-lasting relationships. We've done it across the world. We've done it in Alberta. I know the refinery here in British Columbia has some very tight relationships with its community and with the First Nations. And we do that. We're going to do that with communication and learning from. You know, we're going to make some mistakes along the way, and we are sure people will point them out to us, and we want to learn from those as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to start with a first question to Alan and to Ron. Both of you have mentioned that industry group that you have in Kitimat, and because so many people have talked about the value of collaboration and partnership, perhaps you could describe for people what that industry group is all about, and from your perspective, how's it working, and what's going right about the work of that group?
First one.
Sure, thanks, Marleen. The group itself grew out of a need that I think industry recognized the community was being impacted. And Kitimat, again, probably it's different because we were just up in Fort St. John a couple weeks ago, and of course they have camps all over the country there, but they're not really within the community as much as we're going to see with these large build-outs. So we're seeing increased traffic, we're seeing sort of the pressures of the modernization with the smelter, and so recognizing that, we started an informal group which included Chevron, included Shell, included Rio Tinto Alcan, and we said, you know what, let's just sit down and cut to the chase, because what's going to help the community is also going to help industry in terms of developing. So we bring to the table, whether it's infrastructure concerns, or whether it's housing, or whether it's social services, and the receptiveness from industry has been nothing short of fantastic. And I feel that they're at least a contact that recognizes the need and is willing to do something about it. We originally had an MOU that we were going to sign, and I think when we looked at it at the last meeting, we said, you know, this is like just sitting around and having a coffee around a table. It makes better sense to just put stuff on the table and work with it. Probably one of our biggest issues right now currently is addressing the affordability of housing. The municipality went through and we decided we were going to put a tax on camp rooms on the industrial side. Industry came forward, weren't happy with it, and council said, well, let's sit down and talk. So this group has been that vehicle in terms of how we move forward. And if we screw up here, then Bob, you'll know that's not something you want to do.
Making notes.
But it is a good example of moving forward, and it would be good to hear Alan's take from industry's point of view.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Ron. You know, I think it just speaks to the engagement, and that's the important, vital part of this. You know, to me, being in a partnership doesn't mean that we're going to all come to the table and agree to everything all the time. So if there's a disagreement on this or that, but we've got to keep the dialogue going and understanding. And it's interesting to me that I think everybody who is engaged in these large projects suffers from some of the same issues, in that the resourcing is tight, the funds available prior to a go-ahead of the project are limited, and so the more we can get together, first of all, make it efficient, which what we're trying to do is get everybody at the same table at once and make it efficient, but also have a number of heads together so we can come up with maybe some creative solutions, some common solutions that individually a one-on-one with each company isn't going to surface.
Right. So this is a very important aspect of this, is the direct industry community, direct industry local government dialogue has been very key in Kitimat. Prince Rupert and Terrace aren't as far along, as Bob has joked. They're going to watch Kitimat and see what goes right and what goes wrong, and adapt accordingly. As you look forward to what's going to happen in your community, what would the two of you, Bob and Heather, like to see in terms of industry and community local government dialogue in your communities? Bob, do you want to try that one first?
Sure. We've used this sort of standard planning process where we want to do an inventory, we want to do the analysis of the inventory, and then we want to lay out a plan. And the more collaboratively we can do that, the more successful the ultimate plan and the implementation of the plan will be. So we're at this present stage watching and saying we need to do an inventory. We need to know exactly what our housing is. We've watched some of the challenges that are going on in Kitimat and thought we better have a complete understanding of the demographics of Prince Rupert. We talked about the generational connection, but more importantly probably is how many people are there renting in Prince Rupert and what are their rents? How much of a real rental housing pool that do we have available? So we think the first thing that we're going to do is really embark on an inventory, do an inventory of what our capacities are as a community, how much land do we have, all those kinds of things. It's standard fare for community planning, but the difficulty is usually you don't do a lot of community planning unless there's a reason for it. It looks like we have a reason. So we're doing, we're starting with the inventory piece of it, and then hopefully soon we'll figure out what to do in terms of analysis. We would like to engage and collaborate with industry now so that we can exchange that information and see where it's a benefit to both groups.
Great. Heather?
Yeah, I would say that Terrace is certainly doing a lot of the same things. It's interesting to me that we just adopted an OCP in 2011, and it's extremely obsolete just overnight, just like that, right? In terms of our population projection at that time was like 0.8% or something like that, and it's considerably more than that. A lot of the numbers we're hearing now are talking about potentially 30 to 50% of an increase in population with all, depending on how many of the projects go ahead. So we're investing a lot of time and effort into refreshing all of those planning documents and taking a really good look. And the Northwest Readiness Project through the province is actually providing some assistance to communities to do some of that work as well too. So we were first in line, I think, with a project that we were already moving forward with in terms of reevaluating the land use in the community, realizing that we need a lot more land available for housing, for commercial, that's going to go along, goes kind of hand in hand with the industry development. I think in terms of communicating with industry, I think that they really are doing a good job in keeping our councils informed. I think that they cruise through Terrace. They're very good with us, I think, in the sense that we're not going to be an LNG facility location, but I think that most of the proponents come through quite regularly and update council as to where their projects are at. I think it'll be important for us to continue to share information as we go along and figure out where, I guess, housing is a really good point too. I'm not sure myself where industry fits in terms of helping solve that problem. It's a very big problem. It's a huge problem in Kitimat. It's a very big problem for Terrace as well too. And we've done a lot of good work in that area. We have just done a brand new housing needs assessment. We had one done in 2009. Again, the change in 5 years is just remarkable. We just had it redone. So it'll be interesting to just, I think, keeping the dialogue open. I know that we have very good staff contact with all the various industry groups, which I appreciate, the ability to pick up the phone and talk. But I would be curious to know how do they fit in that particular solution. I know we're talking to the province a lot as well and BC Housing about the housing piece, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one to solve, and it's going to take a collaboration, I think, to see some change there.
Great. Okay. I have a question here from someone in the audience who's clearly from Fort Nelson. And the question is this: we have a great number of fly-in, fly-out workers in Fort Nelson, and we are looking for a commitment for more local training and hiring. We're also looking to helping provide support services, but to date, a lot happens far south of us. How do we go about, here's the question and maybe the request for advice, how do we go about getting a commitment from industry to secure long-term meaningful jobs in the LNG, well, upstream or downstream area that is our home? So someone from Fort Nelson has asked that question, and Alan, perhaps?
Yeah, my panelists here are backing up pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's probably
So
a question
like
for
mine.
you, yes.
Well, I think there's a couple things that are going on. One is with the projects themselves. So none of the projects in British Columbia, as we know, have taken an investment decision. So a lot of this is preparatory work to get ready. The difficulty for the communities, the projects, and everybody involved is once the decision comes, then it looks, and this holds true for the provincial government and infrastructure as well, it kind of looks like it's too late because the demand will be there the next day.
Yeah.
I guess the advice I would have is Apache is our operator, Apache Canada is our operator in the Liard Basin and the Horn River Basin. And they have some tremendous relationships up there. They've worked in the Horn River Basin for many years, and they've been in Liard for over 5 years. And what I would suggest to that is regular dialogue, and we have some Apache colleagues here in front, so I know they're taking notes, to make sure that we're connecting with the communities and trying to build that, what does the future look like, and do the engagement. Because right now we're in our appraisal and proof of concept drilling program, but the real activity is going to start when we sanction the project, start building a large gas plant, putting pipelines in, drilling a lot of wells. So it's really, to Apache and get Apache's attention, and I know Apache spends time with the mayor and council, and that's really the avenue to work with.
Great. Yep, Bob?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's two debates that go on in terms of rapid economic development. The one is that we're going to let the market sort all this out, and the market will sort it out, I guess, one way or another. And I think that's one of the symptoms of the North is just this. One of the answers is the market flies people in, flies people out. Well, you can see based on what I talked about earlier, this is not moving the community, our communities, in the direction of community, but it's moving it back towards the direction of housing industrial labor. And I think that that's up to every community to decide what part of that spectrum they want to be on. But I think I think there's sort of a reluctance to go the next step, which is, are we going to use public policy to solve some of these problems? And the collaboration and comments that go on between industry and local governments, I think, is going to be about, should we have some public policy around these issues? Should there be, should we agree that maybe there's a corporate policy around fly in, fly out? There's a whole array of opportunity that those of us who have some skills at local government public policy, is there a way for us to have that dialogue and not sort of come from it from a point of view of, well, we're just going to let the market sort this all out, because they don't think the market does very well sometimes. And our research from Australia makes it quite clear that there's a change on the landscape when we're flying in and flying out with tsunami-type economic activity, and it pushes us the wrong way in that community continuum, and that concerns me greatly. If we want to have a community when we're finished, we want to make sure that the community just doesn't look like fly in, fly out. Grandparents don't fly in with their grandkids very often. So in terms of my definition of what success as a community, and I think there should be an open dialogue around what public policies are available to try and build the communities that we want to have when we're done.
And maybe if I can just add on to that
Yeah,
a bit.
absolutely.
I think the great part of what we're talking about, the activity in Fort Nelson, is there is going to be a sustained multi-decade drilling program that will accompany the project. So I think one of the key parts of the dialogue is looking at the labor requirements over the whole 40, 50-year life, the skills required, and coming to hopefully some agreement on, okay, how are we going to do this piece? How are we going to do that piece? Because again, when I go back and sit there at Chevron, and we've operated again in all sorts of communities in British Columbia in the past and Alberta, and people from the community are the people you want to operate your facilities, right? I mean, that's in our interest, it's in the community's interest, and everybody is a good partner that way.
It's how do we get there? What's the
get there.
plan to get there? That's great.
Well, I must confess, these conversations seem all too short. We thought 45 minutes would seem like a long period of time. But I think that what we've learned about the value of partnerships and dialogue and collaboration between industry and communities, industry and local government has been very, very valuable. I'm really pleased that we got on the table the example that you guys have going in Kitimat. I think it would be wonderful if you could serve as a resource to communities across the north around how that dialogue is working for both the community and for industry, because clearly that's going to be a key element for communities planning going forward, for the information source and the information that will be conveyed, for the kind of planning that can be done, the kind of problem solving that can be done. So wonderful to learn about the communities and some of the goals and aspirations that you have, and interesting that we're all at various stages. Thank you all very, very much for being part of this panel. You've given us a lot to chew on. So please join me in thanking our panelists for the community benefit.